Now, because cross-site request forgery protection is so important to implement in anything that you build, we want to make this as quick and easy and as beautiful as possible. And that's exactly what we're going to be doing today with the Slim framework. Now, if you've worked with the cross-site request forgery package with Slim before, you'll know that it works something like this. We attach it to our container, and then we go ahead and either add it globally, or we can add it to any of the routes that we want to protect. So we may wish to not protect some routes, which is fine, like webhooks and all that. And then what we have to do, quite strangely, is extract all of these items directly out of the container using that cross-site request forgery container item, and then go ahead, pass it down to our view, and then output them. Now, this is absolutely fine if you are just very quickly creating maybe 1 or 2 routes, but going forward, this actually gets really, really annoying. Now, what we're going to be doing is creating a really simple form. This is just an upgrade button. So just imagine that it's to upgrade a subscription. When I click on this, I expect to have cross-site request forgery protection. So I'm not vulnerable to this being submitted not on my behalf, or rather on my behalf by someone else. Now, the way that we're going to be doing this, if we just take a look at the source of this page, is exactly how we're supposed to. So we still have the cross-site request forgery name and value fields in here. But the difference is, if we just head over to our text area and look at this view, you can see here that we're just using a helper function. And this is as simple as it gets. So this is all you need to include once you've set up what we're about to learn, and you are done. That's all you need to do. So if I get rid of this just to demonstrate, you can see that we get a failed cross-site request forgery check. So with that out the way and done with and looked at, let's go and start to set up a simple Slim app if you are new to Slim, and then we'll go ahead and get this working. Time to set up a simple Slim application. If you already know what you're doing with Slim, feel free to skip this part. If you want to download the code for what I'm about to do, you'll find that as always in the course downloads. So let's get started then. I just have an empty directory here, and I'm going to do a composer require on Slim as always, and just wait for this to finish. And now that's done, what I usually do is go ahead and create a public folder. In this case, I'm not going to, just because it's a little bit more set up. So I'm going to go ahead and just create an index.php file in the root here. But of course, it's always a good idea to have a public directory where you can keep not only your index file, but all of your compiled CSS and JavaScript as well. So just inside of here then, obviously we need to require in vendor autoload, just so all of our composer dependencies are in there and ready to go. And we can create a new Slim app instance. So Slim app. And just for the purpose of this, I'm going to, as I usually do, just turn on error reporting. Just in case we see any problems, we'll see the errors in the stack trace. So within here, within this array, we're just going to say display error details, and we're going to turn this on. There we go. So now let's just grab out our container. So I'm going to say container, and this is going to be app get container. We're going to need that later. And then finally, we will run our app. Now, for any other URIs, we need to make sure that we have an htaccess file in here, or if you're using Nginx, you'll need to set this up. You can find all of this information on the Slim documentation. What I'm just going to do for now, though, is copy and paste exactly what is on the Slim documentation. If you do need to find any more information, you can find that just over here in the web server section. Okay, so now that we've done this then, let's just head straight over to the index here, and we get a page not found, which is absolutely fine because we don't have any routes set up. So before we do anything else, I want to set up views. So again, we're just going to head straight over to the Slim documentation. We're going to come all the way down here to the add-on section under templates, and we want to install Slim Twig View because we need to be able to work with views. And this is really fundamental as well to the way that we're going to be setting this up, because we're going to be creating an extension for our cross-site request forgery helper function. So now that that's installed, we just need to bind this into the container, so register it, and we can do that simply and pretty messily, but we're only messing around here by just pasting this in here. So what we need to do now is just go ahead and create some kind of views folder. I'm going to create this under a resources folder, and I'm going to then create a views folder here. And in here, why don't we just create a simple view? So I'm going to call this home.twig, and we can go ahead and just write home in here just to test things out. So really importantly, when we do register this on our container, we need to point to our resources views folder. So we just go ahead and do that. And for the cache, I'm just going to disable it for the purpose of this video. But you can, of course, create a cache directory just to speed things up a bit. Okay, so what we're going to do now is just very quickly return a template within a very simple route here, and then we'll go ahead and move on. So in here, we get our request, our response, and our args if we need them. And here we're just going to return this view render, passing in our response, and of course, pointing to that home.twig file. So now on the home page, we should see that home template rendered. Perfect. Okay, so last thing before we move on, we're going to be storing everything inside of an app directory just here. So what I want to do is make sure that this is auto-loaded. So over in composer.json, let's just set up auto-loading. So we're going to auto-load using PSR4 like so. And we are going to, in here, give our vendor namespace of app, and we're going to point to the app directory. So one thing to do, composer dump auto-load, and we're done. So that is our simple Slim application setup. Like I said, if you are new to Slim, if you're having any problems with setting things like this up, head straight over to the course download section on this lesson, and you can go ahead and download all of this code as you see it here. So in this part, we're going to look at installing the cross-site request forgery protection package with Slim, and we're going to take a look at how this traditionally works, and hopefully this will convince you otherwise that you'll want to move on to the next part and make this a little bit easier. So the first thing we need to do is just head over to the GitHub page for this. I'll leave a link in the course links as always for this. And we're just going to go ahead and pull in the package, of course, using Composer. So let's do this first, and that should download pretty quickly. There we go. And this is pretty much how we use it. So like I said in the introduction, we can either bind this onto all routes. So this will basically add middleware. What I would actually suggest you do is take a look through this guard class just to kind of familiarize yourself with it. And we can do that now, actually, if we just come over to this. This is essentially just middleware that's bound to either all routes or the routes that you provide. And you can see here that we've got our basic constructor passing in storage, so you can change around your storage or your prefix if you want, and all that kind of stuff. And we have these methods like get token key name or name key and get token value key. And basically we need to manually extract these out and then insert them. Now the reason it works like this, and I completely understand this, is that you may wish to change around your name key and your value key and then the actual name and value. So this makes things a lot more flexible, and honestly this is absolutely fine. But doing this and passing this down to every view gets very annoying. So let's first of all just go ahead and grab this code here. We're going to attach this to our container, so we can do this anywhere. And all this is doing is just binding on cross-site request forgery using a new instance of that guard class that we've just looked at. It's as simple as that, same as what we did with our views. So you would take this and you would bind it somewhere before your routes and after you've defined this out in your container. So something like app, add, and then using your container, you would just grab that out of the container, and this would add to all routes. So if you were to post something through to another route, then this would have protection enabled immediately. So really what we want to do is very quickly create a form over here and post it through to a new route. So we'll do that. We'll take a look at that it fails because we have this on here, but we're not including that hidden input. And then we'll go ahead and move over to the next part. So over in home, let's just create a really basic form, kind of like something that we would want to protect with cross-site request forgery. Of course, it's good practice to protect everything with cross-site request forgery, so it's always a good idea to do this. So what I'm going to do is actually just create a layout. If you are new to Twig, this will kind of help you out with how this works. We're going to extend a base layout. So I'm going to call this app.twig. And into here, I'm just going to create a rough document layout like so. So we're just going to call this cross-site request forgery. And inside of here, we want to basically define out a block where anything will be inserted. So we're going to call this block content, and then we immediately end the block just here. So we're going to say end block. And now what we can do is over on our home, we can extend this and place whatever we want in here. So not necessary really, but it's good to go through these things. So we're going to extend that layout. So layout/app.twig. And then down here, we define out that block that we want to insert, and that's called content. So down here, we end the block and we just place anything inside of here that we need. So let's go ahead and do that now. So the form then is going to have an action of a path. So we're going to actually define this out as a path in a moment. So we need to give our post route a name, and the method is obviously going to be post. Now in here, I'm just going to have a button with a type of submit, and this is going to be some kind of subscription upgrade or cancellation or something like that. So over in index, let's just create a new route. This is going to upgrade a subscription, and we're just going to say /upgrade. And in here, we'll just create a closure, and we'll go ahead and return subscription upgraded just to make things a little bit easier. And this should be just enough to see that this works. So we need to set a name for this. So if we just set a name on this particular route to upgrade, what we can now do, and this kind of leads us into what we're going to be doing, is use a kind of helper function. So we can say path for, and then just give the name. And this is exactly the kind of thing that we're going to be creating to make the cross-site request forgery field insertion a lot easier. So now that we have this, then what we should have is a button that goes through if we actually enable sessions. So by default, cross-site request forgery middleware for Slim, or at least this package, will use sessions. So that's the default storage. And again, we can check that by coming over to the guard just here. And if we come down, we can see that the storage here, by default, if it's not been defined out, we'll use sessions. So all we need to do in this case then is over in index.php or somewhere in a bootstrap file, start sessions within PHP. That's all we need to do. So now we have this button, I click it, we get a failed cross-site request forgery check because we're not including them inputs. So let's do that really now and completely bore ourselves with how annoying this is by default, and then we'll go ahead and fix this up in the next part. So over in home then, we need these two hidden inputs. So let's create these now, and we're going to have a name and a value for each of these, but we need to pass these through to our view because we actually have the name and the value contained, as we've already seen within that guard class. We have their methods. So what we would have to do then, and I'm just going to copy this over from here, is do all of this. So we just basically take all of this, paste it in there, and then we have to send this through to our view. So we can do this now and see how it looks. So name key, we're going to set to name key. We're going to have a value key. And again, change all this over. And a name and a value. So name is name and value is value. Now, there's a couple of problems with this. The first one is that, do we really want to be doing this every single time we are creating a route that potentially needs cross-site request forgery protection? Of course we don't. The other problem is these are kind of generic names, so we're going to have to kind of prefix them anyway, which kind of avoids the point of having to pull out our name key, because then we have to again create a convention to actually pass these through to our view. It's more to think about, and we may want to again change the name from cross-site request forgery name key to something else in the future. Really, this is just a headache. Now let's go ahead and implement this and we'll take a look. So in here we have our name key. So let's go ahead and say name key, and then this is the name value, and I think we just called that value. Oh no, sorry, this is the name, of course. And then we have, even this is confusing to be honest, and then we have value key, and then we have the value, like so. So now if we just go over here, we need to very quickly fix this up, because what happens is when we add this middleware in, it will modify our request, because obviously this is middleware, and then we'll have access to this attribute in here. So it's actually a little bit of a challenge to get this working any better than it does here, but we of course are going to look at it in the next video. So we have our update button, we click it and it works, brilliant, but we're left with the problem that this is a complete and utter mess. We really need to make this a lot easier, and ideally we don't want to have to do any of this at all, and we want to be able to not have to define these inputs out manually for every single form we create. So let's jump over to the last part and implement this and finish it up. Before we look at how we're going to do this, let's just clear all of this out and pretty much start from scratch. So we're not going to be sending anything through to our views whatsoever. And of course, over in here, we can get rid of these two as well. So this is back to the state where it is not going to work. So if we just go ahead and submit this, it's failed. So our goal is to get this working, but using the extension we saw earlier. So the next thing I'm going to do is just demonstrate a simple Twig extension. So by this, I mean that when we registered the view component over on our container, you can see here that we are adding an extension called Twig extension, and this is part of the Slim Views package. So if we just open this up and take a look at it, this will kind of give us a clue as to how we can improve the cross-site request forgery protection. So in here, we take in any dependencies that we need, so we can pass anything through to here. And in this case, we are passing through our router and we're passing through the base path just here. Now, the reason for that is that over here, when we use things like path 4, this actually generates a complete path for us. So again, if we just take a look at this, we have Slim cross-site request forgery update. So this will generate all of that for us. Now, the key to this is then being able to define out these Twig simple functions. And this will call the current class, and it will call a method that you've defined like so. So essentially, path 4 and base URL, the functionality from this comes from these two functions. Now, if we think about this, if we were to create our own extension and then go ahead and use it over here, we can pass through the cross-site request forgery package or dependency on our container, and we can pass through anything else that we need as well. And then we will have a function that we can use inside of views, which is exactly what we want to do. So what we're going to do is just create a very simple one just to kind of demonstrate this, and then we're going to implement the actual full thing, because I always like to kind of play around with this before I get going. So in actual fact, we can create the kind of class that we're going to create now, and then we can just test if this works. So it makes sense to do this. So inside of app, because we're already auto loading here, I'm just going to create a views folder, and inside of here I'm going to create a cross-site request forgery extension like so. And to be honest, what we could probably do is just copy most of this over. It's kind of just like boilerplate. So let's go ahead and just paste this into here. Nothing wrong with doing that. And then we can go ahead and just tidy this up. So obviously we don't need the commenting at the top. The namespace will be different. It will be app views now. And this is our cross-site request forgery extension. Now it still extends Twig extension, so we can leave that as it is. But let's get rid of these dependencies because we don't quite know at the moment what we are passing through. And we're going to go ahead and get rid of get name as well. And we need our get functions, but what I'm going to do is get rid of one of these, and I'm just going to define out a test function. So I'm just going to say test, and I'm going to call a test method. So once again, we can get rid of these two. We really don't need these. And we also don't need this set base URL either. So let's define out a test function here, and let's literally just return, let's say your name. So in my case, Alex. So now that we have this, as long as we add this into here, we should be able to use a test function within our views. So let's go ahead and do this. So it's under app views, and it's our cross-site request forgery extension. And at the moment, we're not passing any dependencies through, so we'll just get rid of them. So as long as we've done everything correctly, what we should be able to do now is somewhere on this page, use that function. So let's just come anywhere on here and go ahead and say test like so. And then we see that works. So this is the kind of basis of getting this working. Now what we can do is actually make this work to output some markup for us just to make our lives a lot easier. So over in our extension, what do we need to pass into this in order to extract the information from our cross-site request forgery package? Well, of course, we need to send through that guard class. So let's go ahead and do this. It's as simple as saying container cross-site request forgery or container get cross-site request forgery, whatever you want to do. And now over in our extension, we can accept this in. So let's bring back our constructor just in here, and I'm going to type hint this. So at the top, I'm going to use Slim cross-site request forgery and guard, and let's just fix that up. And now I can type hint this here, bring this in, and go ahead and set it to a property, and then we can use anything we want on that. So this guard equals guard. Go ahead and create our property up here like so. Brilliant. So now what we can do is create a cross-site request forgery field function, which is exactly what we want to do. And we're going to call cross-site request forgery field method. But of course, we're going to keep convention with function names. We're going to have underscores. With our method names within this class, we're going to use camel casing. So all we need to do in here now, and really you can separate this out into multiple methods if you want to tidy it up, is literally here just return some markup. So what I've chosen to do is just in single quotes, because we are outputting markup, literally just write all my markup in here. And then we can use the guard class here to go ahead and extract out the token name key, the token name, and the value key and the value. So pretty simple. So all we really need to do in here then is just create some hidden inputs. And I can't use my macros here, so I'm going to have to manually type all of these out. So type is hidden, and we have a name, of course, and we have a value. Let's duplicate this down, and this is going to be our other one. So we pretty much now do exactly what we did before, but this time we're not passing it down to our views. So for the name, let's go ahead and concatenate on this guard get token name key. So just as we saw before, and the same for our value as well. Let's go ahead and concatenate on this guard get token name. And like I was saying earlier, you can separate each of these fields out into separate methods if you want. There's not really much point because we're always going to, we're always going to need both of them. So it's entirely up to you what you want to do. So for our last one then, it's get token value key. And for the value, it's this guard get token value. And we are done. So that really is as simple as it gets. We now have our extension. We are registering this extension, passing through our cross-site request forgery package on our container. We're adding it to all routes, and in a minute I'm going to show you how to add this to individual routes if you don't want it on all of your routes, and we should be good to go. So what we can do now is just make sure we didn't break anything, come over to home, and instead of using that silly function we created a minute ago, we're actually going to use the cross-site request forgery field function. Now, at the moment, this isn't going to work because by default, Twig will escape all output, which is exactly what you want. So you're going to get the following, but this is good to see that it works. So we've got cross-site request forgery name, value, and it looks like all of this is okay. So there we go. So now, to actually get this working, we just need to use the raw filter within Twig, and this will go ahead and actually add it to our form. We click update, and it works. So there we go. That is as simple as it gets. You can include this on every form, and by default we have it enabled, or at least cross-site request forgery protection enabled for all routes. Now if you wanted to add it, say, to just the upgrading of a subscription, what you're going to need to do is not only add it to your post route just here, so this is how we add middleware for individual routes. You are of course going to need to add it for this one as well, because this is actually generating the token. So when we land on this view, this is generating the token, so we need the middleware in there for it to be able to actually generate it, show it on the form, and then go ahead and check it here. So this will work in exactly the same way, but it just means you have a little bit more flexibility if you wanted to exclude certain routes from this, so you could just add it to any way you wanted. But for most purposes, all routes protected by cross-site request forgery is a good idea, and you can see now that this works as normal. So there we go, a simple Twig extension to go ahead and output all of the cross-site request forgery information that we need, so it is super convenient to include in our views.